Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Radnor Township School District regular business meeting of February 25th, 2020. I'd like to report that the board met in executive session on February 4th and this evening, February 25th, to discuss legal and personnel matters. And we'll get right underway with our report from students. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. With the second semester ramping up, we have plenty of updates for you. Immediately following midterms, the Radnor Model UN team traveled to two conferences, Johns Hopkins and Georgetown. The competition was extremely strong, but Radnor pulled out a very successful performance. At JUMUNC, Johns Hopkins, Ellie Davis, Aiden Leonard, Owen Leonard, Keon Bina, Juliana Bryant, Nick Speranza, Asa Hartman, Ann Griffin, and Mohen Lee were recognized with awards. And at Naaman, which is Georgetown, Jesse Conan, Keon Bina, Ann Griffin, and Sebastian Caper were recognized. The sophomore class has been truly showing their talent over these past two conferences, giving lots of hope for the future of Radnor Model UN. One thing that has been very difficult for some of the families in Model UN is the price of each conference, which we are required to attend 3 of. The conference is expensive itself, but then our parents need to fork up even more money for our meals for 4 days at these locations. When I was at JUMUNC, I was talking to delegates from other schools, and one thing I heard from many of them was that their school hosts a conference itself at the beginning of the year to help prepare the members into the MUN mindset, as we call it. What a great idea I thought this was. We also learned that it could help make our club a few $1,000s, which we could put towards either a possible international conference in Amsterdam over spring break, or even to just the local conferences that we attend. The overall goal is to help lessen the burden for families, but to also allow our delegates to succeed. On another note, the junior student government met this past Friday after school to discuss junior prom. We concluded that we would host junior prom in the cafeteria, and we began to plan our decorations for our city-themed event. The junior student government this year introduced the JLC, the Junior Leadership Committee, to allow other juniors to participate in the planning and organizing of events. For example, during LM Week, the planning for posters is exclusive for the student government, but there are a few members outside of student government who are always dedicating significant amounts of their time to these preparations, and we felt that it would be nice to be able to formally recognize them. The JLC members are extremely talented and creative, and we hope that we'll be able to successfully pull off a junior prom with their help. On another note, the senior student government and senior class celebrated their senior semi on Saturday. It was held at Radnor High School and was an enjoyable way for the senior class to get together before one last hoorah at senior prom. The boys' basketball team, unfortunately, but fortunately, had to miss the pre-parties and a bit of the dance for their playoff basketball game, which Austin will touch on soon. Finally, Mr. McBride's annual diaper drive is beginning. Students are able to bring in diapers to earn some NHS service hours. Overall, we have a lot of fun events coming, and we're excited to let you hear more next month.
Hello, everyone. In February, our sports department performed excellently with our number 10 seed girls basketball team defeating the number 7 seed Bishop Shanahan team on Tuesday with a score of 43-28, allowing them to advance to the second round of District 1 playoffs. They traveled to the number 2 seed Penwood High School team on Saturday the 22nd and won with a score of 67-59. Sticking with basketball, our number 8 seed boys basketball team beat the number 9 seed Upper Moreland team on Wednesday the 19th in the first round of District 1 playoffs with a score of 50-41. Now on to other sports. The squash team left Thursday the 20th to compete in the Mid-Atlantic Squash Association, or MASA, Nationals over the weekend in Connecticut. 8 students competed, and the junior varsity team was Division II finalists and went with a score of 2-1, beating Central and Germantown, but unfortunately lost to the Squash Smarts JV team. In Connecticut, the junior varsity team lost the consolation finals at 3-4. For diving, senior Brian Chettle competed at North Penn High School on Friday the 21st in the district diving championships after finishing second in the Central League competition. He placed 10th at the championship. Related to diving, one of our athletic directors, Lauren Devlin, talked to me about the swim team and said that at the Central League Swimming Championships this past weekend, Casey Cullen finished second in the 200 free and 100 fly. Audrey Collins was second in the IM and sixth in the 100 fly, and Marina Wang finished second in the 53 free. On the boys' side of the relay, Jack Underkoffler, Jack Lindegren, Rhett Crossgrove, and Chase Bentley won the 200 medley relay. The first took third, fourth, and sixth, respectively, in the 100 fly, while Bentley was fifth in the 50. For wrestling, 14 varsity wrestlers headed to Interborough High School on Friday the 21st for the District 1 South Championships, with Bobby Hydresco coming in second, Damian Falcone and Chris Henkel in third, and Dietrich Jerome and Zach Funk in fourth. Last weekend, the Pennsylvania Track and Field Coaches Association, or PTFCA, Indoor Track Carnival at Lehigh University, Kiara C. Schultz won the 800-meter by 2 seconds with the time of 2 minutes and 17.1 seconds. She also ran with Lucy Henkel, Lucy Minning, and Jillian Matunis in the 1,600-meter relay, taking fifth place. Unfortunately, their time of 4 minutes and 10.18 seconds was below the qualifying time for the PTFCA state championship meet. Not so related to sports, but still important, Radnor High School's musical production of Les Mis is coming up on March 5th through 7th. The cast, including me, has learned all of our music and choreography, leaving us with props and costumes left on the agenda until the show. Tickets are going soon, so get yours while you can. Us, along with the rest of the student body, are eager to get to the second semester after midterms and are so grateful that we can do it with such an amazing education system. Thank you, and see you in March.
Thank you. We're going to get right underway with our report from the superintendent, Mr. Batchelor.
Good evening. Good to see everyone. Thanks for being here. A couple of things just want to share very quickly. One, we had an exciting opportunity. The Attorney General for Pennsylvania reached out to our school district and asked if he could come to Radnor to announce that the state was taking action against Juul and looking at the concern that we all have nationally, but also in the state of Pennsylvania with vaping and especially the marketing to younger students. It was a really great opportunity for us as a district. What I appreciated about the Attorney General was he had an opportunity to not only talk to the students about and I felt he didn't lecture. I don't know, but you guys are nodding. You know, he really talked about it as a parent. He talked about the negatives and all the concerns with vaping. He talked about also, from a legal perspective, why the state was taking this action. After he presented to the students, he then had an opportunity, you can see from some of the pictures, to meet with kids individually in the library and discuss it even more with them. And it was just a great opportunity to talk about what is a very serious health concern we have with our students and the choices they're making when it comes to vaping. And it was also a great opportunity for a lesson in the legal system and from our Attorney General's perspective. So it was a really wonderful moment, and we appreciate the Attorney General, reaching out to us in Radnor. And I also want to just thank our administrative team. When the Attorney General reaches out to you and says they want to come and make an announcement, it happens about, Friday around 3 o'clock that they're coming out Monday morning. So there was a lot that had to be done to have that happen so quickly. And it was the Mrs. Kevgis, Mr. Bechtold, Mr. Petiti, and I'm leaving people off, but there was a whole team of people who had to really jump to make that happen, and I appreciate all those efforts. Mr. Brooks as well from an operations side. The whole team came together to make that happen, which was great, so thank you for that opportunity. So we have a day of unplugging coming up. So when we as a district looked at our technology and set out a 3-year technology plan, and we talked about technology in the district, we also talked about the idea that technology, for the sake of technology doesn't make any sense, and that there has to be a balance. And we also started to talk about that we need to start educating our students more about being balanced with screen time and also the downsides to I know as a parent it's very frustrating. My kids call me out on it too, because I call them out how often they're got their screen in their face. And that all of us, adults and children, need to be balanced and be thinking about how much we're getting addicted to some of this technology. While the technology is so beneficial and can be helpful, there's also a balance in it, and we need to be healthy with it. And so we've taken on the initiative the last year to talk about some healthy tips when it comes to technology, healthy tips both as we talk about our sleep and wellness in the district, what is that balance of when you should be using technology in the evening as well, and also with our teachers, that it's okay to not always use technology in the classroom, that there are times when technology helps our educational program. It is a wonderful tool and really enhances the educational program, and there's times when we don't need to use it as well. So we are grabbing hold and being part of the National Day of Unplugging, and we will be unplugging. The day is March 6th. I think it's March 2nd. Sorry, March 2nd. Thank you all. March 2nd, and it does coincide with Read Across America as well. I have had a few administrators say that that's great. They don't, Ken, we don't have to answer your email that day or anything like that. We still need to get our jobs done, but we are as best as possible looking to try to take a day of unplugging. And this is one of the videos that Mr. Petiti and the team has put together from communications, Mrs. Gangle and Nikki Crone. So I will share this video. It's less than a minute. Yeah, it's like 30 seconds.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, so we just put together a few clips to roll out prior to the day to get our community kind of excited about and give them some ideas of how they could unplug and what they could do while they were unplugging. And this was just one kind of idea that we put out there. If I can get to it, of course. Yeah, we actually have cell phone sleep effects for all of you today. We brought them to the meeting. Audio. Yeah, I'm going to need that.
Okay, well, we're going to be passing out our board member, what do you call these, technology
Cell
sleeping
phone
bags?
sleeping bags,
Cell phone
yes.
sleeping bags.
Yes.
These actually look
So
really cool, thank you. I don't know who made them,
put
but
your
thank
phone
you.
in those, take a nap.
Yes, I will. I think that's the right number. Here you go.
Oh, should I pause this? All right, here's the video,
Here we go.
if you like. Yeah, so there's a couple more. Thank you. Thank you all. So there's a couple more on our YouTube channel if you want to check out the other 5 in the series. You want to see one more? I mean, they're only 30 seconds now. All right, here's another one. Yeah, look at this. It's going to happen now.
These are cute.
Yeah.
So we will be sharing apps, not apps, in early March with everyone on March 2nd. I want to thank Mr. Petiti for all the different clips and for working with the students and the administrators to publicize the National Day of Unplugging. And we do have, to encourage our students as well that when they're in class, here's a place you can, when you turn off your phone and you put it in your bag, here's a place to hold it so that when we're in class as well, and we can, as board members, put our phones in here when we're in meetings as well. There you go. So I hope that the community can join us as well with this day of unplugging. So thank you. Next, Michael, you good to go to the next? Sorry. So just wanted to mention, you can see from the picture, I don't know, the big picture is a little hard to see, but we did something different this year, and I want to thank, our strings and our orchestra teachers for putting together a strings festival where they brought together all of our students who were playing in the orchestra. They brought them all together from the elementary, middle school, and high school for one big, large performance. And it was really spectacular to see all the kids together, to see the elementary kids getting a chance to see both the middle school and see the high school program, to get them excited. One of the things that we want to see with our kids is that they continue with that music, continue with the playing the instrument they're playing. Music is such an important part of, and the arts, but especially music is such an important part of our education for our students, and having a chance for our kids to see the continuity and where they can go when they stick with it, I really think was a nice opportunity. So the large picture there, you can see all the kids on stage, which was really a wonderful moment, seeing them all together. And again, want to thank the staff for making this happen this year. They did have a guest triangle player, I got to tell you, and the reviews that I have seen online, you guys have seen some of the reviews, have been just off the charts for the guest triangle player. That is me playing the guest triangle player down on the bottom right for one of for one of the pieces, they're not inviting me back. Let's just say that. So after my missing my opportunity a few times, it was a lot of fun, and I want to thank the kids for actually inviting me to be part of it and to have a little fun and joke around with it as well, which was great. And then update on last day of school. So we shared this with our faculty just yesterday, actually, just as a reminder, and it received great reviews. People haven't realized or have forgotten, we did something different this year. We organized a calendar committee a year ago to really look at our calendar, to look at some different options, and one of the recommendations from the committee over a year ago was to build in 4 snow days. So in building in 4 snow days, where we have traditionally built in maybe 2, sometimes 3, sometimes none, and we just tack those snow days onto the end of the year, by building in 4 snow days this year and announcing that the end of the school year is June 18th, but there's 4 built-in days. If we don't have any snow days, and believe me, I have not wanted to talk about this publicly, and I'm still nervous because I think I'm going to jinx us, because all due respect, students, it's been glorious in my perspective that we haven't had a snow day, though one nice storm would be nice, but it has been wonderful. If we don't have any snow days this year, we will end the school year earlier than we have advertised. So as you could see there, we advertised the June 18th end, but if there's 0 snow days, we will instead end on Friday, June 12th. So we will be getting that information out to our parents as well as a reminder. We won't make the definitive call until we get through. It seems to me that always the start of spring sports, usually March, it seems like it's usually next week with the start of spring sports, some storm usually happens or something. So I wouldn't be surprised that I'm clearly jinxing us and we're going to get a storm or something in the next couple of weeks. But I just want to make sure our public is aware of that schedule moving forward. So we'll be sharing that out with our community as well as we go forward. Next, I want to change gears and just say thank you. So Mr. Brooks graduated from Radnor, and there's his yearbook picture, and out of respect for the guilty, I left his year off but Mr. Brooks is a Radnor grad, and he graduated from here once, and sadly, he's graduating one more time. Mr. Brooks has been our operations director, has brought just incredible amount of skill and knowledge to this position. We are better for having him here with us and working with us and leading our operations department. He was sought after by another district to become their chief financial officer and chief operating officer, and we're not surprised, with your skills and talent and expertise that they came after you. So we don't have a diploma for you tonight like we did before, but we want to wish you well and thank you, and I do have a gift for you from the board and from the administrative team, Mark. Here, you can use this one if you want, or that, whichever.
I can remember the day that walking through the hallway and one of my fellow graduates brought out the yearbook and said, "Look, Ken, here's a picture of Mark when he graduated," type of thing. And he said, "Oh, I got to get a picture of this." I knew that was coming back to haunt me. I didn't realize when, but I figured it'd be today. So thank you very much. Thank you all very much for the opportunity you provided me. I really appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Sorry. From the personnel side, as we thank Mr. Brooks and wish him well, we have some exciting news tonight in the area of technology. Dr. McCook is sitting over there, who's our current director of technology, was kind enough that he gave us a lot of advance notice of his intent to retire, which this board has already approved back in the start of the school year, with his retirement coming this summer or in early July. We've been working on selecting Dr. McCook's replacement to be our director of technology. So while we still have time to thank Dr. McCook and for his service, tonight we have the opportunity, the board will, on the agenda we have for approval is our next director of technology. So I want to welcome Dr. Scott Hand. Dr. Scott Hand is coming to us from Kutztown School District, where he is currently their Director of Technology. Before that, he had worked at Fox Chapel School District in Pittsburgh area, involved again in technology and teaching there as well in administrative roles. And we have just been thrilled to have Scott join us. He has impressed us from the very first moment in the interviews with not only his insight and his knowledge of instruction, but also his knowledge of I call it the under the hood technology nuts and bolts as well, and also his vision for how we can use and leverage technology in a balanced approach to really improve our instructional program. So we are just thrilled with what Scott will bring to us. So that is on the agenda for tonight, but I want to welcome Scott, and we'll have an opportunity after the board has a chance to vote where we expect a long speech, so get ready, so prepare. No, Joe. Events. This is I don't know when it is in a busy time of year. I find myself each month saying, oh, we got a lot going on. It seems like we always have a lot going on, but there's exciting, and especially highlighted there, this is that time of the year, as our students mentioned. I call it musical season. So it is musical season as we come up. So please take note of some really fabulous and exciting things happening in the school district over the next month. And we'll be watching those playoffs as well that our students shared. I want to thank our donations for this month. I want to thank the DeLucy family for the donation to Ithan Elementary School PE department, and Avangrid for the donation to the administrative building, which was the office furniture and miscellaneous office supplies, and the DeLucy family for the vaulting board and gymnastic wedges to Ithan Elementary. So again, we can't do what we do without the support of the community and some very gracious donations, so we're really appreciative. That is all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Batchelor. Okay, now we're going to get underway with tonight's recognition, which is going to be done by Mrs. Goldman.
Oh, this is nice and big. I don't think I need my glasses. We'll give it a try. After months of wiping hard drives clean and reinstalling software such as Windows 10, Microsoft Office, and Adobe Reader, the Radnor High School Microsoft Registered Refurbishers Club delivered 75 refurbished laptops to Willard Elementary School in Philadelphia on January 20th. The computers were donated by Radnor High School and club members. 10 printers were also donated. Club members purchased the installed software through Microsoft. And I remember that was Martin Luther King Day, and I was wondering what that big truck outside the high school was, loaded with all of this wonderful equipment. I knew it was going to someplace special. According to Microsoft, the MRR program is for small and mid-sized refurbishers across the globe who want to supply refurbished personal computers pre-installed with genuine Microsoft software to local consumers and businesses, as well as qualified charitable organizations. The Radnor MRR chapter was founded in 2005 at Radnor Middle School and moved to Radnor High School in the summer of 2007. The members of the 2019-2020 Radnor High School Microsoft Registered Refurbishers Club are And actually, I'd love to call up Mrs. Holshoe, their faculty sponsor too, so don't be shy back there. You've been at this a long time, Mrs. Holshoe, right? So would you like to come up and we'll call up your students? That was a big haul of equipment and quite an incredible feat. So let me read off these certificates of recognition. We'll start with Chase Bentley. Is Chase here? And Alan Chung.
It's not in.
Nope, okay. Nathaniel Jean. Skylar Lee. There's Skylar?
He's not
No?
today.
Oh, no Skylar
Huh.
today? I see Toby Lee though, right?
If I give Skylar to that one. No, Nathaniel Jean's here.
Oh, Nathaniel Jean is here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So Toby, this is for you. Minato Matsuoka. And Yuma Matsuoka. No,
Yuma's not in today.
no, Yuma. Okay. Jason O. Nick Speranza. Kichiro Wang. And Benjamin Zhao. As I said earlier, the club is led by faculty sponsor and program director Nancy Holshoe. Have you been with us since 2005? 7? 9?
2007.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so this is really incredible. The superintendent, along with the board and the Radnor community, commends you students and their parents, teachers, and faculty advisor on this outstanding accomplishment and your generosity and your caring for other communities that are less fortunate than yours. We really appreciate that. Thank you. Now, if you would like to turn, we're going to have you meet all of the members of the board. So if you'd like to turn this way and shake hands and form a line and go around, that would be super. Thank you so much for working on that. Thank you. Hey, Nick, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for that work. Great work. Great work with that. Thank you so much. Great work. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher, for your work on that.
That's really great, thank you. Okay, so we're now going to be entering the public comment portion of our meeting. Citizens are encouraged to address the board during the public comment portion of the meeting on the agenda or other topics related to the Radnor Township School District. We ask that you print your name on the sign-in sheet at the table in the back of the room, and when you come forward, clearly state your name and address. You can write your names down afterwards if you'd like, and your topic to be addressed. Individual comments, we do request be limited to not more than 4 minutes as per Board Policy 006. And should you be unable to attend our meeting tonight, you may submit your board comments by email to boardcomments@rtsd.org or in writing to Mr. Michael Petiti, Radnor Township School District, 135 South Wayne Avenue, Wayne, Pennsylvania, 19087. If there are questions, the administration will review them, and the corresponding answers will be posted on the district's board docs website by the start of the first committee meeting of the following month. Do we have any public comment at this time? Welcome. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Allie Bauer, and I am one of the co-presidents of Action Earth, Radnor High School's Environmental Club. I am also a member of the Green Team, a subcommittee of the Board of Commissioners. I am here today with my co-president, Becca Zajac, and a few other student supporters from Radnor High School. Right there. You may have observed us during a similar campaign, Ready for 100. If you aren't familiar, that resolution was to adopt 100% clean energy for Radnor Township's buildings by 2035. Ready for 100 is in the implementation phase now because it was passed by the commissioners with vocal student and community support. We would like to introduce a complementary program that also supports clean energy initiatives. It's called Climate Parents, and it's focused on clean energy for school buildings. We feel that Radnor would be a good candidate for an implementation like this. You may have been contacted by members of our group through email, but we would also like to tell you why we care about this issue in person. Climate change is rapidly taking over, and we can already see its effects: melting ice caps, ocean acidification, intense weather patterns, and more. As I am in the generation that will feel these consequences directly in my lifetime, I'd be saddened to watch ignorance degrade the world that we all know and love. I do not want upcoming generations to live with the same fear that I have that our quality of life may be corrupted by a preventable cause. We are sure that there are many questions about our proposal, and we are happy to answer them in meetings or via email moving forward. Our team is planning to speak with a few board members in the upcoming weeks to hear your opinions, suggestions, and questions regarding this initiative. By making the transition to a renewable energy, our township can help lead the way to a more sustainable future. Thank you so much. Here's my friend, Teralyn Whitmer.
Thank you, Allie. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Teralyn Whitmer, and I'm a junior at Radnor High School. I've been involved with Action Earth since my freshman year at Radnor. Climate change is a very important issue to me, hence why I joined the club. Although I am involved with this club at school, I have found that my personal impact extends past school hours and into my extracurricular activities. Last year, my dance team and I performed a dance called Dear Future Generations, choreographed by Bilal Simpson. The focus of our dance was climate change and how it will affect future generations to come. Our director chose the song Dear Future Generations by Prince EA, and I encourage you all to look it up on YouTube. As we performed the dance throughout the season, my team and I were asked what we thought the meaning of this dance was to us. Personally, I find that it's important to educate everyone on climate issues, not just through social media and through posters, but also through art. If efforts aren't made to slow down this catastrophe, future generations will never get to see beautiful landscapes for themselves, but only through pictures, as Prince EA mentioned in his song. So every little change, every effort that can be made is a huge step in the right direction. Even though our Radnor community is small compared to many other communities out there, shifting to renewable energy would make a world of a difference. And maybe the change we make will inspire other communities to follow in our footsteps. The change we make today are changes that will allow future generations to experience the amazing phenomenon we know today as nature. Overall, this issue is very important to me, which is why I became involved with Climate Parents. We look forward to speaking with you soon about this project. Here's my friend, Becca Zajac.
Thank you, Teralyn. Welcome, Becca.
Thank you. Thank you, Allie and Teralyn, also for your comments. Hi, everybody. I'm Becca Zajac. I'm a junior at the high school. Recently, I've been active in our community regarding environmental policies. In our freshman year, Allie and I formed Action Earth because it seemed like the best opportunity to inspire change. We share many of the same concerns regarding the future and the consequences that we face already. Some of the impacts being less snow days because it's warmer. No more snow, it's rain now. But right now, let's take a look at the past. The first time I realized what problems we were facing was in 4th grade, when Mrs. Baker taught my class what deforestation was and what was happening because of it. That night, and I remember this vividly, I couldn't fall asleep. I had a heavy feeling inside me that I couldn't do anything about it, and it scared me. Since then, that fear hasn't left, but it's changed. Now I know I can do something about it, and that's because I've been given the opportunity to learn. In 7th grade, I was in the watershed program and was exposed to an environmentally oriented curriculum for the first time. We watched documentaries about agriculture and pollution. We studied stream health in relation to pesticides. We explored topics that I never thought about before. Since then, my interest in sustainability has played a major role in my life, as it will continue to do. Many people never get the chance to have an education like what Radnor has given me, and I'm extremely grateful for it. I want to pay my gratitude forward back into this community and implement a solution to the global problem of climate change early on in a way that is both morally correct and financially viable. We look forward to speaking with you guys soon about this. For more information about Climate Parents, I invite you to visit climateparents.org or follow the Climate Parents on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you, Becca. Do we have additional public comment? Welcome, Dr. Winters.
Welcome. I'd like to thank the students for their comments tonight and also express my personal appreciation to the service of Mr. Brooks and Dr. McCook. Thank you. And I also would like to mention, as a teacher, I was pleased to work with Brian Garber, who started the Microsoft refurbishing program, and who is a very skilled young man, and at Ithan School actually began his interest in technology before he could probably read by fixing machines in the library that were not stamping the books correctly. So it takes, a village to make a difference, and he's one who has done it from the beginning. So we're happy he's in Silicon Valley, making the world a better place, hopefully. I would also like to commend the board before the end of the meeting tonight for your adoption of a civility policy. We know it's been a problem in other boards in this community, and it's always delightful to know that people can have a committee and a board where civil discourse is possible and people can disagree yet not be disagreeable. So thank you so much for putting it on the table and moving forward on an important initiative.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. Do we have any other public comment? Mr. Petiti, are there any emails?
I thought they were going to talk more.
Oh, great. Sure, please, welcome. Come forward.
Hello. My name is Preston Tyrell, 21 Oakford Road. Last month, the board voted not to change the start date of school for the 2021 school year, despite recommendations from almost all involved. The main reason was, to paraphrase what most of you said, was that you did not want to disturb family vacations. The other main reason is it was felt that there was not enough time to notify the families of the calendar change in the event they had already made plans. The main point was there was not enough time to communicate the change. I don't think the importance of this calendar change was communicated to the families and may have lacked some transparency. Otherwise, I think you would have had more people at the last meeting. And I think people have not truly realized what the full impact of this calendar means. The district has spent millions of dollars to improve student learning and increase test scores. Yet it seems the board is willing to sacrifice that so that some families can enjoy the last week of summer. So to be clear, you voted vacation over education. Summer's last hurrah beat out Keystone's, PSSA's, and the AP exams. That's a pretty bold decision by a Board of Education. I think we're all against the flip-flop calendar idea. The calendar as it stands now has school starting the second week of September, and if we have snow days, based on your current plan, the students potentially will be in school until the Wednesday before the July 4th holiday. Let that sink in for a second. As we know from the snow days of just a few years ago, when the kids were in school late into June, they had checked out weeks before. The last month of school had little educational benefit. One of the biggest concerns for not moving the calendar was the lack of time to inform parents. So according to school district math, 9 months is not enough time for parents to make changes to their plans. Yet last year, you gave 6 months for parents to plan for the change of school start times. And just last week, you changed this year's calendar, giving 4 months' notice that the last day of school may be moved up a week. Clearly, there is still time to make the right choice. I know you can't control the weather. Many years ago, they had built-in snow days like Easter Monday and the Friday before Memorial Day. You knew a year out, if it was a mild winter, that those days would now be off. For whatever reason, they're gone. After the winter of too many snow days, the board, not you, but the board, your predecessors, made the knee-jerk reaction of to have no snow days built into the calendar. This year, because of the mild winter and no snow days used, there is a potential of ending school year early, with parents having to scramble to find what-if daycare. This is the year to move the start day before Labor Day, as many other districts do. It's most likely not going to happen next year, because with the school year ending so late in 2021, to move the start up a week, we would be losing 2 weeks of summer of 2021. One at the start with school going late, and one at the end with school starting early. And that, my friends, would be too much of an impact on summer vacation plans. I'll admit I have not watched or attended many of the calendar or curriculum committee meetings. But what is the issue with starting early? The culture of Radnor? The culture of Radnor was not an issue when we moved start times. The culture of Radnor was not an issue when we went to full-day kindergarten. Why is it an issue now? Face reality, most of the high school students are back at school anyway, as the PIAA training and game schedules start weeks before. The band, cheerleaders, and other clubs are also back. Has anyone looked at the cost savings of moving the start date up? This is the year to make a switch. I urge you to do the right thing and put education before vacation. And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, we would be moving into committee reports, but I'd actually like to pull item 14.1 and bring it up to this point in the agenda. That is our personnel action item, and I would entertain a motion to accept 14.1.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, so on this agenda is, among other things, the approval of our hiring of the Director of Technology, Dr. Scott Hand, which Mr. Batchelor mentioned in his administrative remarks. So for that reason, I pulled this just to be able to bring it up earlier on our agenda. Do we have any comment about the agenda in general, about this item? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of 14.1, please say aye. And seeing no opposition, this motion is approved 9-0. Welcome, Dr. Hand. Would you like to just come up and say hello to your new Radnor family?
Congratulations, Dr. Hand. We're excited to have you, and I know we have a start date of June
24th?
24th. Sorry, my memory today, June 24th was start date, and I know you're eager to begin, and we're eager to have you start.
Thank you for accepting me and allowing me to have the invitation to join the Radnor family. I'm really excited to be a part of a school district that has such a strong tradition of excellence, and being able to meet so many people already, from board members to a wonderful administrative team and some really incredible teachers and actually some amazing students that we saw here today. It'll be my privilege to be able to join this team and serve, and I know Dr. McCook has set a great foundation for me and honestly set me up for success, so we can build upon that and be able to go together into the future, and I'm really excited to work with the team, so thank you.
Great, well, thank you very much. We look forward to having you on board. Okay,
And
so with that...
Scott, please, just one last thing.
Sure.
You may not stay for the rest of the meeting, so it's wonderful to have your wife here, too, and thank you for joining, but I don't want you to feel like you have to stay. There's other meetings where you will have to stay, so take advantage of the fact that you can leave tonight. Go celebrate. Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to have our committee reports, and we'll get underway with our curriculum committee report. Ms. Solomon?
Thank you. The curriculum committee met on February 18th. On your consent agenda tonight is the approval of one club, and I just have to say this, the golf club. Just love it. And 2 field trips, the FBCA trip to Hershey and the watershed trip to Paradise Farm. Also at the curriculum committee, we received presentations on the implementation of Saturday school program at Radnor High School and Radnor Middle School. And I think the committee was in strong support of that idea and implementing that. We received a presentation on Title I, a plan to basically use our Title I money for a whole school support. And so part of the outcome of that would be the addition of a new administrative position of an assistant principal to our administrative staff. There's a long write-up about this, and I'm assuming that people have seen all the documentation behind this change. I do want to say to Mr. Dukovich that I appreciate that there was Title I money on the table, and you made sure that we got it rather than lose it. And just my own personal edification of this, I think there has been some changes in the structure at the elementary schools, seeking out the right balance for our schools. And so, hopefully we can get it right and settle down and have some continuity with that. So thank you for all that work. And then the third thing from our agenda, we received a presentation on the changes to the kindergarten registration process. And the reason for this is to allow basically better planning and screening and preparation for our upcoming kindergarten classes. And our next meeting will be March 17th at 5 p.m.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Facilities Committee, but I actually don't think the meeting met right.
Yeah, so the Facilities Committee did not actually meet this month, but just so no one thinks that we were slacking off when there's so much going on in the district, we didn't meet, in fact, because we were participating in interviews of potential candidates to run our feasibility study in the district, which you will see on the agenda as priority action item number 8, so we'll talk about it in more detail there. But that's where the members of the committee were on Tuesday night.
Thank you.
It went much longer than a typical Finance Committee meeting.
Got that. All righty, so the Finance Committee met on February 11th, and on tonight's agenda, you see approval of our monthly financial reports, as well as acceptance of gifts that Mr. Batchelor mentioned earlier, and disposals of items throughout the district. In addition, we have our agreement with Villanova University, so upon approval tonight, everyone please note, graduation will be June 10th, 2020 this year. In addition, we have some perfunctory paperwork approval of the PlanCon paperwork. This is associated with the bond refinancing that we did last year. We also have an agreement for our online benefits enrollment, which is an added feature for our employees, and approval of our district grounds maintenance agreement. So and those were on our item tonight, and on our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 10th at 6 p.m. Let's see, have our Policy Committee report.
So the Policy Committee met on Tuesday, February 11th, and there are several items on the agenda tonight for approval. Item 13.1 is a first read for Policy 202, eligibility of non-resident students. This policy was just revised a few months ago and came back to the committee for the purpose of clarifying a provision that allows senior non-resident students, senior meaning senior class, non-resident students to remain in the district on a tuition-free basis. It only applies to students attending Radnor High School and only for 1 year immediately following the student's junior year. Also on the agenda, item 13.2 are 3 policies for a second read. The first one is Policy 249, bullying. The school code requires that this policy be reviewed every 3 years, and it was last reviewed in 2016, so it was time for this policy to be reviewed. In addition, the title was changed to bullying as opposed to anti-bullying, as per my vice chair. I put that in there for you, okay? In addition, the definition of bullying was revised to reflect the definition in the school code. The reporting and investigation procedures outlined in the policy were rewritten to be consistent with the procedures in Policy 247, anti-hazing, which may someday be hazing, in order to ensure consistency in internal processes. And there's an administrative regulation that goes along with this policy. And as was mentioned in public comment, Policy 919, civility, is a proposed new policy for our board. During the review of Policy 249, bullying, a committee member inquired about how bullying-type behavior committed by non-students is handled, and it was suggested that the district should have a civility policy to address such behavior. And the last policy up for a second read is Policy 906, formal complaints. This policy was revised to more clearly define its intended scope and the procedures to be followed for filing, investigating, and responding to complaints. We also changed the policy name from public complaints to formal complaints. And last but not least, item 13.3 on tonight's agenda are 3 policies that are up for a second read for repeal. Migrant students, Policy 142, Policy 143, Standards for Consistently Dangerous Schools, and Policy 144, Standards for Victims of Violent Crimes. These are all policies that are covered in other ways and do not need to still be on our books as per our solicitor and administrative liaison. And all of this work was completed, I'll have you know, in about 30 minutes in a policy committee meeting. So I want to thank our administrative liaison, our solicitor, and our wonderful policy committee for being super spot on prepared, and boy did we rock it last policy meeting. Just wait till you see what we have on the agenda for March. The policy committee's next meeting will be Tuesday, March 10th at 5 o'clock.
Thank you, Ms. Goldman. Government Relations and Communications Report. Dr. Babson, was there a meeting? No, there was not.
There wasn't, so.
So it's a short report.
Mine is my report is considerably shorter than the policy committee. Because we didn't meet.
The belt of brevity goes to Dr.
But we do have one planned for Tuesday, March 10th at 7 p.m.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Babson. Okay, let's see. We're going to move right into our priority action item, which is 8.1, approve the district-wide feasibility study. I'm going to read the recommended action, just the top part, and then entertain a motion. That the board approves Breslin, Ridyard, Federo Architects to provide the feasibility study on an hourly rate basis not to exceed $78,500. In addition, Decision Insight will provide analysis of district-wide and building-level projected enrollments for a fee of $10,520 to $14,313 based on the options selected by the district. We do have a whole sort of goals here, but I'm going to leave that out. So at this time, I would entertain a motion and a second, and then we'll get into a discussion about this.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. Mr. Batchel, are you planning on having Mr. Brooks come up? Or
Yes.
are you going to lead this?
No, I have Mr. Brooks is going to come up
Great.
and share some information about this topic with the
So
board.
welcome, Mr. Brooks. You'll land on a big, you'll end on a big hurrah with a big priority action item here.
I feel honored. I don't know what to say. Hang on one second. Let me just find this, Mr. Petiti. Here we go.
It's on your, should be at your seats.
Yeah, so at your, board members, while we're getting the PowerPoint, at your seats is the paper copy of the PowerPoint for tonight. So Mr. Brooks will take some time just going through, why we would like to, as Mrs. Dunn, as Sarah mentioned, we had a facilities meeting where we interviewed different architectural firms. We had an administrative team there as well, where we listened to their proposals. We have decided to go with one particular architectural firm to conduct the feasibility study. Let me put some context to this. When we created our district goals and our district priority projects, as we discussed them in the late spring, summer, and then, for this school year into the fall, one of those priority projects was to conduct a study, a very thorough study of not only our enrollment, but also to look at the lifespan of our buildings and come up with a plan to understand and a study of what is our lifespan and what are the needs of all of our buildings in the district, and then also how does enrollment impacting those needs that we may have within our buildings. And we talked at that time that the way to do that, one of the most efficient and thorough ways to do that is to conduct a district-wide feasibility study. So we're at that point now where we're administratively recommending we go with a particular architectural firm to conduct that feasibility study. In the state of Pennsylvania, having that feasibility study will allow us that opportunity that if we should be ever seeking Plan Con dollars down the road because of this discussion, one of the things you are required to do is to have a feasibility study. So not only will it give us the information that we would need to understand, the lifespans of our buildings, to have that 10, 20, 30-year plan, but also to have that in-depth study to look at our enrollment and the enrollment projection as well, so we understand both from a structural need, what we need from our buildings, but also based on our demographics. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Brooks to share that information, and then we'll open it up to board questions.
The easiest thing is what he said. No. So what is a feasibility study? A feasibility study in Pennsylvania is if you want to do Plan Con, or if you did want to add something to a new building or build a new building, the state requires you to do a study to determine whether or not there's a need. We've already identified in May, if you recall, that we looked at the enrollment coming into the elementary schools, and that we are up against the wall. If we have the projected increase that the one Pell study that you all had commissioned is correct, that we'd be up against the wall with the number of classrooms that's available to us versus the number of projected students, that was going to be a bit of a problem moving forward. So we looked at what we needed to do moving forward, and included in that is an evaluation of the buildings from an engineering standpoint, which again is part of the feasibility study, because the state's going to look at this and say, well, can you just modify a building, renovate a building? Do you have to build a new building? Can you just add on to a building? If you add on to a building, can the system support that type of add-on? So those are the questions the state would ask. Even if you don't get any Plan Con money, those are the types of things they want to make sure you're doing. So there's something called the Taj Mahal Act, and they want to make sure that school districts aren't out there just building large buildings for no real purpose, that there is an educational value to it, that you have a plan in place. And then that's pretty much what a feasibility study is necessary for the state to even approve what you're looking to do moving forward, which at some point Radnor's going to have to do something. So again, just that's kind of the basis of a feasibility study. What we did was put together an RFP and sent it out to 5 different architect firms, and we looked at different things that we wanted to have included in this study. So not only the in-depth analysis of the physical plant, which is required by the state, the floor plans required, code violations we looked at, because we do figure that we do have some code violations throughout the district. Some of the buildings, one building was built in 1963, another one was built in 1972. At that time, they're grandfathered in, but at that time the codes were not what they are today. It clearly stated. We've already identified at the high school that we have some ADA accessibility issues. We also identified that in some of the other buildings, so thought we'd go through and have that codified for you as well. Looking at the energy efficiency, again, back to the students that were here earlier tonight about trying to make sure that we have a sustainable project. We wanted to make sure that sustainable schools, want to make sure that we're getting the most energy efficient possible structures in place. Again, making sure the buildings are in structurally sound, which I believe they are. What type of repairs and replacement. And again, looking at, when we first started, we talked about having a 5, 10, 20-year 30-year capital plan out there, so you can look to say, here's what we need to do moving forward, here's the monies that we need to set aside, here are things coming up down the road because the life cycle costing is over, or life cycle of that particular item is exceeded its normal life, making sure you have the money available so you're not all of a sudden going, oh, we have 15 rooftop units at $150,000 each that need to be replaced in the next 5 years. How are we getting the money? Again, so you know this moving forward. Again, just what type of other types of things to look at is what we can do to get the information to the district so then you can use it moving forward otherwise. Now, in addition to the physical concerns, we also want to look at the demographics of the district. So you had a Pell study two different times, I think 2016 and then 2018-19. Looking at that, you need to identify what areas you have that are growth in the district, what areas of migration you have. So for example, one of the things that sometimes districts miss out on, and something a rather new phenomenon, is 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when you had a 55-year or older community come in, the idea was, oh, that's zero impact to the school district, because theoretically, those housing units don't have a bunch of students in there. And that, on its face, is true. However, what has been found is that you have people who may have and use me for example, my wife and I, we have a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. If we decide that we want to downsize because I don't want to mow the 2.5 acres anymore, we may buy into the community of 55 and older because somebody else is mowing the lawn. But more importantly, that house is now available for somebody to move in with a family of 4, perhaps a family of 3. So there is, in fact, an impact on that. So again, having a study done, meeting with the municipal government to determine what areas are currently due for construction, and then moreover, looking at areas that previously might have been viewed to be non-developable, looking at the ordinances to say, well, yes, under previous ordinances, it makes sense that this area was not able to be developed. However, the new ordinance does allow for all these other possibilities to come up. So if somebody wants to subdivide their lot, they have a 3-acre lot that previously was not by zoning allowed to be subdivided. Now the new zoning ordinance says that you can. How can you do it? It's a 1-acre lot, so there's 2 potential housing units in there, and knowing what that is and tracking that onto a map. In addition, with tracking onto the map, looking at where they are in the township so you can better determine where you're sending, for the elementary schools especially, where you're going to be sending them. Or is it all going to be in the Ithan area? Is it going to be in the Wayne area? Is it in the Radnor area? And looking at what you have to do for lines moving forward to be able to accommodate any type of growth that you may have. And again, looking at that from a 5 to 10 year moving forward. There's a couple different companies out there. Decision Insight is the one that we're recommending. There was another one, Sage, that we heard about. They're out of Baltimore, Maryland. Decision Insight's out of California. Sage has a lot of experience in the Maryland area, Delaware area. They don't have a lot of experience here in Pennsylvania, although that's not to say they couldn't do a good job. Decision Insight, however, has a number of districts in our local area who have raved about their data, raved the fact that their data is spot on after 4 and 5 years. So we're looking to make sure that whatever monies you're investing in this study, that you have solid information moving forward. And moreover, when we look at the one study that was done previously, I think in 2016, it projected that in 2018 that you would have 316 or 360 less students than you currently do. In fact, you had 200 and some odd more, so you had a delta of a 500 student mistake on that. You can't afford that. You just don't have the capacity in your buildings to say, okay, we can add 2 new classes, 2 new sections to every grade level. You simply don't have that now. So moving forward, wanted to make sure you had that data so you know that if you're looking to have to expand and build onto a building, instead of building maybe 2 classrooms, maybe you know that you need to, in 5 years, build 5 new classrooms. It's a lot more cost-effective and cheaper per square foot to do it at one time than to come back and take another bite of the apple later on. So again, wanted to make sure the district had that data. That's one of the reasons why we're recommending Decision Insight. They've been spot on, and they've worked locally in this area. And ironically enough, the district I'm going to, they're currently involved with Decision Insight and have been very, very pleased with the results that they provided. And again, they have been spot on for the past 2 years for them as well. We looked at different options that provide schematic plans, cost estimates, looking at the rationale for the pros and cons of each option, and executive summary. One of the problems you run into sometimes is you get all this data, and what do you do with it? Well, we're looking to have an architect that's going to be, and a team that's going to be able, between Decision Insight and Breslin, to be able to come in there and say, look, here's what the data tells you. Here are your options. This option will get you this, this, and this. This option will get you that, that, and that. Here's your cost associated with you. And then when you say, well, what would you recommend? They'll step to the plate and say, here's what the best option is moving forward. Some firms are not like that. Some firms will come in and do it for next to nothing because they want to have the option of building a building, or that's what they're looking to do because that's where the money is. Breslin gave you a price, and there's no expectation that he's going to be building a building or doing any type of renovation because you don't know what you're going to be doing at this point. Some districts, for example, the one I'm going to, we'll be building an elementary school and redoing a high school. So we know that's happening, that we have to do that because of the growth up there. You don't have to have that same type of thing here, bless you. You're going to have to certainly add some classrooms at one of the schools somewhere along the line. So we evaluated the proposals. We looked at, again, there were 2 firms that actually came in. One did not respond. Ironically enough, they were from Philadelphia. One firm was too busy, and then another firm that's mid-state that used to do work in this area have just retracted back into the mid-state area because, again, they're too busy and they didn't want to move out back east again. I don't know if they got burned or not, but they were kind of squirrely about when I tried to nail them down on that. But again, we looked at the technical expertise of the firm, Breslin. There's several school districts that we had references on them specific to a feasibility study, and in each case, glowing recommendations from the superintendent, from other administrators as well, that they were easy to work with, and we already have had previous experience with Steve Burns from Breslin on the infrastructure project. So we thought that they would be your best bet moving forward. So again, we're recommending that you spend the 78.5, and then Decision Insight is a different group. That's between 10.5 and 14.3. And the nice thing too is if you wanted to, with moving forward, you have your feasibility study, you decide that you don't want to use Breslin, you want to use Mark Brooks Architects firm, which I don't intend to do yet, but if whoever it happens to be, but you never know. Anyway, so you decide to use somebody else. You can still use, the way you design this is that you can break out Decision Insight and still have them moving forward if you want to keep them to track data. I welcome any questions that you guys might have, because this is the last time you can beat me up, okay?
So I would like to
Oh,
open
we still
the-
have time.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to open the floor for any questions people may have for Mark. Brad, do you want to start, or? Okay, great.
All right. Thank you for bringing this to us, Mr. Brooks. I think when I'm out in the community, this is the #1 thing I hear about. I may have a little bit of a skewed perspective because I'm a parent at Radnor Elementary, where there's a lot of discussion about that, but I think it's something for the whole district, obviously. I have a question more about the demographic study and Decision Insight.
Yes.
I know you mentioned that we had a study that Pell did in 2018, and there was another one earlier, maybe 2014, 2016.
Yes.
What was it about the Pell numbers that we were not satisfied with? Because I remember feeling like what they had given to us wasn't necessarily what allowed us to make good predictions about what was happening. So what wasn't working with Pell that leads us to want to move to Decision Insight? You talked about some of the advantages with them specifically. What's the key difference?
I think, and again, looking at the different reports that they've got, a lot of times that's pretty cookie cutter for not just them, but others as well. The thing that set Decision Insight apart in my mind is that they've contacted the township. They will work through the township. They'll come up with a zoning map. They'll sit there and map out where every student is in the township and try to determine where you are. I don't know that the scope of the work for the Pell Grant not Pell Grant, but the Pennsylvania Economy League study I wasn't here for that, so I don't know what the scope of work ultimately was, so perhaps it didn't include that. But certainly moving forward, you want to have as much data as you can to make an informed decision. So I'm not trying to in any way disparage the Pell Group, but again, I'm looking at Decision Insight as we're putting together the exactly what we think we're going to need moving forward, and certainly looking at their recommendations as to other districts that they've done things across the state, across the country, and things that they have found. So for example, one of the things that we talked about was looking at your Title I money. So imagine, if you will, we have areas that would be considered low to moderate income in Radnor, but if you look at that comparatively to a distressed school district like Chester, our low to moderate income may not meet that same criteria. But looking at that to say, well, where is your dollars coming from, and where is that dollars going to be moving forward, so you know what we're doing, or we as the administration will know what we're doing moving forward with Title I money. With the census coming out, that dollar figure may change. It likely will change because every 10 years the population shifts, right? That's what we come up with the census for. But with Decision Insight, one of the things we discussed with them was to be able to track that so that we would have a better understanding now, so that 2 years from now, when the federal government rolls out the results of the census, we would have a better understanding of what we're in for moving forward. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay.
And one more question.
Sure.
One thing that I think was exciting about when you started as Director of Operations was the opportunity, and I think it was mentioned earlier tonight, to also do a facilities master plan for the district. How much does this overlap with that project, and how much is that distinct with this project? How much are we making a facilities master plan ourselves, and how much does that dovetail with what's in front of us here?
So they're going to take what I've already started, and they're going to build upon that and give you a finished product that you ultimately would have gotten had I done it myself. The advantage is that, they're not going to take it and charge you for it, because they're going to actually have to do part of it this time. So I've gotten, 5 years out, and then we've gotten now With FMX, the person who I work with, Diane, in my office, she's been diligent about taking the information, loaded it into this new software we've contracted with for work orders, and in that, it's very robust so that we keep track of each piece of equipment, sizes of filters, types of preventive maintenance, but more importantly, the age of the equipment, the size of the equipment. This type of information is going to be paramount for anybody coming in to do a study to give you that data moving forward as to what your costs are going to be 5, 10, 20 years down the road type of thing. And again, based upon, just let me also clarify, because I won't be here next month, that when you do that, it's assuming all things being equal moving forward, right? So you have geothermal in some of the schools now. It's going to assume you have geothermal the next 20, 30 years. That may change at some point, and you just have to readjust, if that makes sense for you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Oh, please. My pleasure.
Thank you. Nancy, do you have any questions?
I have the opportunity to sit in on the facilities meeting, and the one question I had coming in tonight has already been answered in the presentation. So
Okay.
thanks for everything you've done also.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Liz, do you have any questions down that end?
Nancy, I had an opportunity to sit in. So, and what I was really happy to see is that we've done some due diligence with Decision Insight, because that was one of my concerns coming in, was whether or not we would feel like we'd end up investing in something and then have quality data that we could act upon with confidence. So, thanks for, checking those out,
Sure.
sources.
My
Thanks.
pleasure.
Jeff?
Since I was not at the Facilities Committee meeting, I apologize if this was addressed there for not knowing. What's the timeline for this to be put together?
So we're
if we
looking-
approve it tonight.
Assuming you approve it,
Yeah.
I think he's looking to have that wrapped up for you in 3 to 4 months, is what he
Okay.
stated. The other vendor was looking at 6 months. maybe a
This is
little
an
longer.
Insight? Would that
No,
be this?
not
Oh, the
this.
other vendor that's competing for it, okay.
Okay, great. Sarah?
So I just had a couple quick questions, I promise. One, I know when we met in the feasibility study interviews, there was some discussion of whether you engage the enrollment data group for just a year, or if you enroll them for 3 years to kind of refine their projections. I didn't see anything in here about this. Obviously, we don't have to commit to it, but I guess I wondered what your personal recommendation was.
My personal recommendation is that you do that, because then you have them on the hook moving forward. If the data's wrong, why was the data wrong? You guys have to go redo it. What is it that changed that caused the data to skew out of whatever that delta that you're going to accept? So if it's a 1% change, or whatever change the district finds to be acceptable, have them on the hook to do that. And then once you have your plan for your buildings and what you're going to do with them, then perhaps you don't do anything for the next 5, 10 years and just see how things are moving forward type of thing.
Okay. The other thing I just wanted to remind you, I assume you had this conversation, but the group that did the interviews wanted to make sure that the deliverables that we get as part of the feasibility study are not just in a format that feeds into our work order system, but also that the report and executive summary pieces are in a format that are easy for us to communicate to the community, because obviously we want them not to have to read, a book-length treatise on why we need new things.
Yeah, I did talk to Steve. One of the criticisms that Breslin has is they're not as flashy, perhaps, as some of the other architect firms that made presentations to us with a lot of, flash. He's a little bit more, he comes through a little bit more substance, perhaps.
Yep.
Not to say I'm trying to speak in ill of the other ones, but, so I did talk to him about how they have to punch up their presentation and make it much more visual, and that is something that they realize as a priority project for their company, that they need to hire folks to come in to make that a much more visually pleasing, because not everybody's going to want to read through a spreadsheet. They want to look at a graph and go, oh, that makes sense to me.
Right,
So-
and I think we were clear, we don't want to pay for flashy
Yeah.
bells and whistles and, lights that bounce
Right.
off the ceiling during the presentation, but we wanted something that's easy for people in the community to digest.
Right, they're anti-disco ball, so.
There you go. Thank you, Mark, and thank you again for all your work.
My
It's been a
pleasure. Thank
pleasure
you.
working with you.
Andrew?
Yeah, just a few things. So I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. So do these firms have any experience working with each other?
Decision Insight and Breslin?
Right.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
So there's a couple districts, I'll name two off the top of my head, Copley Whitehall and Wissahickon, that Breslin had done a feasibility study and also had Decision Insight was their partner moving forward for the data aspect of it.
Okay. I would think that that could be an important, synergy.
Yes.
Also, just to clarify, so they say that that if Breslin might be engaged to design and manage a significant project resulting from the study, that they might, credit.
That's an option, but it's certainly not an expectation.
Okay.
It's again, it's a carrot.
Okay.
He's holding out a carrot to you.
Okay. All right, good. And then finally, just to clarify, so that the 10.5 and 14.3, that would be in addition
Correct.
to the
Correct.
not to exceed.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Lydia?
Yeah, I remember hearing this in the presentation. I sat in the couple hours of that, but I wanted to ask you just to expand upon it in public.
Sure.
So they did talk about, I think, if they were to prepare plans on expansions to buildings or construction options, that they would talk about making them LEED certified.
Correct.
And so could you just talk about, I just think it's important in light of some of the public comment tonight, that is a priority of mine, and so I just want to hear how that might fit into this project.
Sure. The one thing about Breslin that I liked originally is that basically half of their architects are already LEED certified. So, and just as a side note, Mr. Dukavich and I had met with the PTO parents, and one of the projects they're looking at is sustainability. And we talked about how, or they mentioned the fact that we had the LEED Gold building for Radnor Elementary, and when it was first put in the first LEED Gold school in Pennsylvania. And I said, it would be interesting for the kids to have a project and look at what qualified for LEED points back then and what would qualify today, because we've come very far with that whole LEED process that several of the things that they got points for before are now part of standard construction best practices moving forward. So to answer your question, I think you certainly would have the option of whatever you want to do to go for the LEED certification, but it is very clear to Breslin, predicated upon the infrastructure project and other conversations, that this community is very sustainable oriented, and that we want to make sure that whatever is being done is low impact, long term, and then energy efficient moving forward. Now, whether or not you go the route of having solar panels or wind turbines or something like that, that would be something the district would have to determine at some point. But they're not prepared to make that determination, but they certainly can aid you in that because they've done that in other locations. Does that answer your question?
No, that's excellent. I remember looking at the resumes of the team and seeing that I think even their lead person is LEED certified. And I just think it's important that the community know that we are looking at that, and that, at least to me, that's very important. And so I appreciate, just you highlighting that for us. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Amy?
I guess one of my questions is, I know that Breslin is working with us on the infrastructure project at the high school. So is there anything through the process of doing a feasibility study that could have some sort of a significant impact on that process?
So there would be certain areas of overlap, true. Certainly part of the project that they'd be looking at for the infrastructure would be something with the feasibility. So they're already going to make determinations as to the life cycle of some of the equipment going into the gym, going into the pool, assuming that that type of work is being done moving forward. So that would be incorporated into the feasibility study moving forward. Certainly they would look at the space, because they're already familiar with that space, and how that's being adjusted. And that too would be part of the feasibility study, because while the infrastructure is more for what we currently need at the high school, the feasibility study is also looking at what you currently have and what will you need moving forward to accommodate the students. So there is a nice synergy marriage that would take place for those guys to be able to build upon what they're doing and deliver hopefully a better product for you.
I guess I'm just wondering, it's the same firm that's done the work so far for the high school infrastructure project.
Yes, ma'am.
Now they're doing a feasibility study. Is there a different set of eyes or a different set of glasses that they put on when they're doing feasibility versus the infrastructure? And could there be some findings that come out of feasibility that have a significant impact potentially on what's already been scoped out to some extent for the high school?
I don't know that significant would be the right term, but there are certain things that will come out in the feasibility study that will certainly help drive some of the decisions, I think, on the infrastructure project. Additionally, there's another gentleman that's coming along with Steve, so it's another set of eyes. The advantage to having the same people in all your buildings is when they come in to make an evaluation to a building. So, for example, I've seen an architect firm come into a building with 10 schools, and they had 3 different teams. So Team A may say, well, this is a 4.5. Team B looks at another building and says, well, that's a 6.5. Had they gone into the same building, the 4.5, the other team might have viewed that as a 5.5. I'm just throwing a hypothetical at you. It's nice to have the same people evaluate everything across the board so that you have uniformity and consistency. Some architect firms don't do that. Breslin's going to have Steve, and there's one other person who's going to be with him, as well as the engineer that we met the other night. He's going to be there, as well as the Hugh, who you've met before the board. He is Hugh Kuslow from ELA, so he's going to be the site engineer. You're going to have the same set of eyes looking at everything. So I do think that through the feasibility study, there are things that are going to be uncovered that they'll be able to go to the infrastructure project and go, hey, look, this is something coming down the pike you're going to have to take care of. Let's try to incorporate it in here. Let's not try to reinvent the wheel. The worst thing you'd want to do, in my opinion, is to do the infrastructure project, have the feasibility study say, oh, well, we need to have 5 different classrooms. And in the infrastructure project, we only did 3, let's say. If you can have the 5 classrooms identified early on, it's going to be much cheaper per square foot to build those 5 classrooms at the same time you have everything else going on than to come back 2 years later and build those classrooms.
Right, that's where I'm going, and I'm just wondering if there's been an intentional effort to sync up the timelines of both projects, because the feasibility study wasn't on the table when a timeline was established for the infrastructure project. So can you speak to the syncing of those timelines?
Sure. They are. The infrastructure project is ongoing. We have a meeting on Friday as a kind of a kickoff as to where we're going moving forward, and then that's going to be over the next 6 to 8 months, and this feasibility study is going to be done within that 6-month period, and hopefully less than that, probably 4 to 5 months, I hope. So that information is going to be fed back then to the infrastructure committee to go, here's what we found and here's what we think we need to do.
And one of the selling points has been, among many things, but that there's a lot of efficiencies actually. So this is a benefit that we have. We have an area of one of our buildings where we already conducted a feasibility study. We had a different group who conducted the feasibility study. We moved beyond that feasibility study to let's now look at designs and where we could go. So some of, I think, the pricing that we're receiving from Breslin is there's a lot of reasons, but there's one of that is a reflection of he knows already and understands components. Certainly there could be things that we find from as we look at other parts of the building, but many of the things that we found with the infrastructure project would have probably been found, if we just were doing a feasibility study. So I think in the end what we're getting is some efficiencies, which is really great and going to help us and has brought the costs down as well for this study.
Yeah, to your point, though, let me go one step further on that. Remember, the feasibility study for the infrastructure was merely that section of the high school, not the high school as a whole. The feasibility you're looking at is going to be the high school as a whole. So if there's a determination that you need to have additional classroom or additional space or modification to spaces, again, there's going to be that advantage of having the construction going on simultaneously or the design going on, that they might be able to incorporate that into it. So there is an advantage from that standpoint.
Okay, that's good. And then this is a question, I don't expect it to be answered tonight, but I'm trying to get my head around, and as I have previously, is when was the last time we did a feasibility study as a district?
Probably 2016.
A feasibility study?
You had to have one for what are the modifications to the Radnor, or Wayne Elementary and Ethan.
Oh, you mean for?
Not for the entire district.
Not
We
for the
must have
entire
just done it
district,
for
you just had it
that.
for those
She means
two.
a full scale.
Yeah, I mean a full scale like this.
2007.
2007?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and again, not to be answered tonight, but I'm just want to get my own head around how the implication that has for budgeting and planning, capital planning.
It's going to be an aid for you moving forward. It will be much.
I'm sorry, what did
It's be an aid for you. It will aid. They'll have that for you developed, So it will be something the district can refer to. The only thing I will caution you on is once it's done, remember, it's not just something you put on the shelf. You have to update those numbers every year for inflation. So that, you take it off the shelf 10 years from now and go, oh, well, it's going to be $5 million to do that roof. Well, it could very well be $7 million or $10 million, depending upon inflation and cost of materials and labor.
Okay. And the interaction with the township is going to be primarily through the Decision Insight group. It's not so much Breslin. Decision Insight is the one that's going to be checking with the township for population potential.
Correct. For the population and demographic aspect, yes. Breslin will be interacting with the township for code compliance, getting a sense of where they are and what types of requirements they're going to have to do if they wanted to, if they decide that we need to add on to a school, for example. What does that look like? What type of code review has to be done? What type of land planning? What type of zoning? Whereas that's not something Decision Insight would get involved with the township. The Decision Insight would get involved with the township merely from a demographic standpoint.
Okay, and my last comment was just the scope of the work where it says number 1, our work approach includes meet with administration, school principals, maintenance staff, and others to collect data, review space utilization. I mean, I didn't see students mentioned in there, and I sort of feel like students sometimes have ideas of how space could be better utilized, sometimes even, that might contrast or complement what the adults have to offer.
Sure, we certainly could include that. That's not going to be an additional cost. He's already meeting with the students for the infrastructure project, so this will not be foreign to him to have them included in the process.
Actually, I think he mentioned it.
He did.
So he was out of all the ones actually mentioned it in the presentation that would be part of it.
Okay, great. All right. One final question. Is there any benefit to looking at non-public schools to see as this evolves, not just peer, school districts, but non-public schools? There's a lot of building going on in the non-public world too, and is there anything to be learned from looking at those? Or is it a completely different animal from a public school?
So my response to that would be, let me give Cheltenham as an example. Cheltenham, a school district, was looking at doing more STEM and STEAM, and they were modeling some of their initial preliminary drawings and concepts against a private charter school in California that was specifically STEM and STEAM driven. The way those classrooms and those spaces for student learning were designed were completely different than the standard 1,000 square foot or 900 square foot room where you put in 30 desks, right? You had garage doors, a lot of glass, a lot of sunlight coming in, a lot of free space that kids can move around, maker space that kids can do stuff, the students can do stuff. So as a rule of thumb, it's not a bad idea to see what somebody else is doing, especially if they have a good idea, because then we can steal it and copy it type of thing. I would caution that the private school would not have the same regulations regarding prevailing wage necessarily, depending upon what state you're in, for construction, so that what may be, and I'll pick the California school I was thinking of, what may be $160 a square foot in California for that private school, if that was a public school, might be $320 because of prevailing wage and other regulations of a public-private difference between public and private. So I think it's a great idea to get ideas. Just I would not necessarily be married to whatever the private school's budget is, because they're not required to follow some of the same regulations that we would be as a public school in Pennsylvania, if that makes sense.
Yep. No, that's great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Mark, thank you for all the work. I appreciate it. So Amy asked one of my questions, actually, which was, I think it's been quite a long time since a full-scale district-wide feasibility study has been done. So this seems to hold well and really complement our district goal about understanding our capacity. But I do have a few questions. So with regard to Design Insight.
Decision Insight.
I'm sorry, Decision Insight. Will they be creating their own study independent of the Pell work?
Yes.
They're not going to be like peeling off of the Pell data?
No, we're not providing that to them. I want
Okay.
them actually to come in and make sure it's an organic version.
Okay.
study moving forward. I don't want any pre-biased.
Great, thank you. That's kind of where I was going with that. Do you know how far out you're expecting their work to project? Is it a 1, 3, 5, 10? How many years out?
We said that we wanted to have all 1, 3, 5, and that those numbers are pretty good, but we also asked them to go out to 10 years.
Okay.
Now, they'll tell you that 10 years.
10 is less.
There's
Sure.
a lot more room for error in 10 years because we don't all have a crystal ball yet.
Right, and in terms of communicating with the township, they will be reaching out to understand from Radnor Township officials there's a lot of proposed development in Radnor.
Yes.
I was just fellow board members, the Board of Commissioners president did reach out to me to alert me to, quite a bit of proposed building that is, residential building that is up for consideration here in Radnor.
So to answer that question, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure,
They'll
no.
look at not only what's on the books now, but again, they'll look at your township map, the zoning overlay, and try to determine whether or not there's potential moving forward that may or may not ever happen.
Sure, but there is some proposed development that hasn't even been submitted yet, but it's kind of common knowledge at this point. So yes, really understanding what those things could be. And when do you expect deliverables from both Decision Insight and from
If you approve it
Breslin?
tonight, I would say within 4 months, you should have a deliverable.
Okay.
And they probably make a presentation. I would imagine you'd probably want a presentation from them, and they may have to go back and refine something if you
Okay.
have some additional questions or concerns.
All right, great. Let's see.
And that wouldn't be uncommon.
Sure. So in terms of the work that the feasibility study is going to provide us with, again, with the deliverable, I understand it's going to be quite helpful to, it'll complement the capital planning work
Correct.
that you're anticipating. But how long do you expect the feasibility study to be useful for us? And I'm not talking about the cost estimates. The cost estimates portion of that, well, that's going to be a nice to have. Those are not going to be particularly reliable numbers, but whether, to use your example, whether the new roof would be $5 million or $7 million, is one piece of the puzzle that you don't know what it is until you send it out to bid. But to understand the lifespan of the buildings, are they going to be helping us look at the next 1, 3, 5, 10? How far out is this feasibility study going to be looking in terms of life cycle of our various buildings?
So the ones I've seen that Breslin has done
Sure.
is that he will provide to you. So let me give you an example. You may have an option to renovate an elementary school. You may have another option to build an elementary school on a site that you may already own land for. It may be cheaper initially to do the renovation than to build new. They will provide you 40 years out, whether or not that went in Contango and switched. That 40 years out, long term, it was cheaper for you to build new than it was for you to renovate the building. Because remember, a new building 40 years out is 40 years old. A building that's renovated may already be 20 years old, 30 years old, or 40 years old. And if it's 40 years old, now that's 80 years old.
Sure,
40
right.
years out. So there's going to be some additional costs associated with maintaining the envelope, the steel structure, the stonework, depending upon what type of design you might have, that you would not have had you built the new building. So I think that's the other advantage. They'll show you today, and then they're going to show you what it looks like 40 years from now, and then you can make a decision saying, well, okay, yes, we will save some money today, but long term, it's a more, if we're looking long term at the district, it's more economically feasible for us to go ahead and do the other.
Okay. All right, and so then the other two questions, because actually over the course of the project and the questions that the committee, the board has asked, it's filled in a lot of the blanks for me. In terms of the high school project that's, we're currently in the midst of, does Breslin understand, or could you have a conversation with them where focusing on the high school first to kind of fully vet, fully evaluate the high school may make the most sense to do first, so that if there's any information about the building as a whole that could inform the, the current project we have underway?
It pretty much is already happening, because they're already doing the evaluation of the areas that would be looked at for the infrastructure project.
Sure.
They're already doing that evaluation with regards to systems, amount of electric, how
Okay.
old's the wire, where the conduits, what type of telecommunications you have. So they're going to focus, I'm sure, on the high school first to knock that out, since they're there, it makes sense,
Mhm.
and then move on to the other buildings.
Okay, and so then the other buildings, that actually brings me to the last piece. The one thing that this proposal does not include is our other buildings.
When you say other buildings, all school buildings, it does not include Sulpizio Gym. The reason why it does not include Sulpizio Gym, and certainly we can talk to them about having an evaluation of that building and any other building we have, but you would not want that in the feasibility study that you're turning over to the state, because that's non-educational space. And that's unfortunately going to skew your ability to do whatever you may want to do moving forward if you have that space included in the original feasibility study. That's the reason why we segregated out and just said school buildings, knowing that you are going to have to do something at some point in the future with the state to get approval to either add classrooms, whatever you want to do. Sulpizio Gym would be, unfortunately.
So Sulpizio Gym is considered separate because, we do hold some of our middle school
you don't
sports things there.
You do have some sports things there, but it's not something you have consistently, regularly classrooms in.
Oh, classroom space.
Yeah, so remember.
Okay. Nope, no, that's fine.
It's all
Enough
driven
said.
about student space that they're using on a daily basis.
Okay, and so then what about the rest of our, so this feasibility study is just about buildings. If we wanted to understand the feasibility, and maybe that's not even the right term, or the functionality and the utility of other, we own field space, but that wouldn't be within the scope of this project.
Correct, because remember, this is a document that is going to provide you.
It's about buildings.
It provides you buildings specifically related to students. That's not to say students don't use fields outside of our campuses, but if we were to do that, that would be something you want to do distinctly separate, because again, if it's submitted to the state, you don't want that skewed differently.
Okay, got it. So this study,
Yes.
theoretically, if anything is revealed or indicates to us information that might cause us to want to bring it to the state for review,
Yes.
the entire study gets sent to them. We don't just send them, oh, we're looking at XYZ school, so we send them that portion of the study. You have to send this study to them in totality.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful for me to know. And, but again, this study, how long do you expect the document reasonably? I understood what you said about the comparison between a renovated elementary school and if we were to build a new school. I understand the cost of that for 40 years out, but in terms of the lifespan of our buildings, our systems, our functions, the functionality of our buildings as they are today, how far out is Breslin, is this study reasonably going to provide us with information? 5 years or 10?
I think probably longer than that for the actual mechanics of the building.
Mhm.
For the actual enrollment of the buildings, you're probably looking at 10 years.
Okay,
So,
but again,
two different aspects of
enrollment
it.
and functionality will be two different
Two different
documents?
Two different aspects of so that you, again,
Will we receive one deliverable that's kind of Decision Insight and Breslin together will
Correct.
give us one deliverable?
one deliverable, but in that, you're going to have your Decision Insight who's going to justify the need for whatever you're going to do. And then you're going to look at your capital and say, well, clearly we got some problems here, and let me help identify. Ithan is 1963. It's not as new as Radnor Elementary School. Perhaps we need to do some renovations at Ithan, and that's where you identify where your need is, or where you already identified the need of students. Now you have identified where you want to spend your money.
Okay, so now I'm about to ask a question that I don't know the answer to, so I may regret the question. Is there a benefit or a disadvantage to receiving this report as one deliverable as opposed to two separate deliverables? One about demographics and population, and one about the status of our buildings?
The deliverable to the state has to be combined. So he's giving you a BEC 90 report, which is what the state's looking for as part of this process. In that process, the state's going to ask you, or ask the district and say, okay, you've said that you wanted to build 10 new classrooms, just arbitrarily, 10 classrooms. Why? turn to page 63.
Sure.
Here's the reason why, we've identified this, we identified moving forward 1, 3, 5, 10 years out our projections.
Mhm.
This is the reason why we want to justify us building those 10
Okay.
classrooms.
But,
So,
okay, so let me just,
I think there's going to be some discussion, too. I mean, I don't, this study isn't going to all of a sudden come forward and say, this is the one thing to do.
Correct.
The
you
study,
options.
there's going to present options, and it's going to explain that, you know, based on what we believe is enrollment, this is what your needs. Also, additionally, based on what we look at the lifespan of different pieces of equipment in that piece. So I think there is when you look at I remember looking at several of his completed studies, there is a way to pull out
Correct.
and sit there and say, okay, here's the enrollment piece, here's lifespan piece as well.
Yes, you'd be able to do that.
so I guess, let me ask
I mean,
it a
does that
different
make
way.
sense?
Yes.
Had we separately hired Insight or Pell, I'm sorry,
Sage or
Decision
Sage was the other one.
Insight.
Decision Insight or Sage.
No,
or-
had we separately hired Pell 2 months ago, 6 months ago, whatever, and had them working on demographic data right now, and then came to the place of, yes, we want to move forward with a feasibility study, we really want to understand the condition of our buildings. If all of that information led us to a place where we thought we might need to contemplate construction such that we needed a feasibility study to present to the state, could we have combined two
Yes.
separate documents?
Yes.
So then back to my question, is there a benefit or a disadvantage that the documents are combined together at the outset as one deliverable? Or is there not really any difference?
I don't know if there's any difference,
Okay, I think that's
my
really,
honest opinion.
okay. All right, thank you. You've answered all my questions. I appreciate that.
I had one clarification about a question.
Sure.
My impression of the capital plan that we're getting as part of the feasibility study, this is going to need to be replaced in 10 years, whatever, was that it's a 20-year plan.
Yes,
Okay, I think that's what you were asking.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
I
fine.
missed that detail.
That's okay. And I guess since it's been 13 years since we had the last one done, what's a best practice? I mean, obviously, you don't get one done every year. You don't necessarily get one every 5 years. What's the best practice for when the district should plan to run another feasibility study?
It really depends upon your need.
Okay, so it's based on kind of observation of the community and, it seems like we're busting at the seams or we have empty classrooms.
Yes, so,
Okay.
two thoughts would be is that once you have your capital plan, that you want to make sure it's a living document. Somebody's updating that every year. And then that way you don't have to go back to the well and pay somebody to come in and do that. So that's a living document that's happening all the time for you. And then you can budget accordingly for whatever those dollars might be. If you suddenly have a zoning change in the township to say that I'll just arbitrarily pick something, an R1 zoning district says that you can build on a half-acre lot, one house. If for some reason Radnor Township changes the zoning for R1 to say that you could put on a half-acre 30 apartments, that would probably be a good time to go ahead and have a feasibility study come in, because then your numbers are dramatically going to change. The other thing I would say to you is, with whatever our numbers is, like 50%, I think, goes to non-public schools. So Decision Insight's also going to look at, and I'm going to suggest that they do something called a shock test, so that in the event that the economy goes south, as my stock has the past 2 days, but in 2008, if things were to go south for an extended period of time, it is conceivable that there are some of the parents who may not be able to afford to send their students, their children, to a private school, and thus will be reverted back to the public school. So I think, especially in an area like Radnor, where you have as many private schools in the area and a number of students that do participate, it would be prudent to have that type of data and have that type of evaluation. So moving forward, not to say that you want to go ahead and build 10 classrooms and have 8 of them vacant for 10 years. That really doesn't make any sense. But if you build 10 classrooms and you have them vacant for 3 years, knowing that you potentially could need them, that does make sense. Because it doesn't really make sense that you get the things done, you have the ribbon cutting, everybody pats themselves on the back, and you start the process all over again, because it's going to take 3 years to build the new classrooms. Does that help you with that a little bit?
Nancy had a question. Amy, hang on. Nancy?
Just a little bit piggybacking on what's been said before, is there like a shelf life for the feasibility study where the state of Pennsylvania requires a certain?
Within a year and a half of submission to the, under the current plan con, which is
Okay.
subject to change.
So it'll be good for a year and a half.
Pretty much, you could probably get 2 years out of that.
Okay.
Do we?
2 years out of it for submission to PDE.
Right.
It's usability in terms of our
Correct.
our information in terms of the usefulness of the buildings and the functionality. But I would imagine that much like a demographic study, say we get all the information we get, and say 3 years goes by and we decide that there's a piece of information on there that we're ready to move forward on that might indicate we have to do a submission to PDE. I would imagine, and maybe we should see if it's in the contract, I would imagine that we could do kind of a refresh, kind of how you do a PDE, Pell has done like an updated.
Right.
The report we got in 2018, Bradley, to answer you, was kind of an update of a more full demographic study we had paid for previous.
So yes, and that's the reason why I'm recommending that you guys keep Decision Insight as a separate contract, so that you can hire them for the next couple of years just to keep things current for you. They can go ahead and update that. So PD is not going to necessarily want you to redo your buildings, because your buildings probably haven't changed that much, right? They're going to want to know your student population and the projection of students coming in. That's the variable, that's the Y variable that they would be looking at. So by keeping Decision Insight on, or if those numbers are still rock solid moving forward, you can buy yourself some extra time.
Amy?
Does that answer your question?
Oh, just gonna, sorry.
Amy just said one more.
When something caught my ear when you just said 50% of the children in
I could be wrong on
I
that.
know it's not an accurate percentage, but it actually raises a question for me, because I hear this question all the time. What percentage of students use our, residents use our public schools? So is that something that Decision Insight is able to ascertain? Is there some usefulness for a statistic like that?
So Decision Insight and the whole feasibility study process is the students that are actually walking in your door and educated. The state really doesn't care whether or not the private schools are using your fields at night. They don't really care if they're using the fields later on, or if they're renting them for like the pool or something like that.
Amy's asking a different question.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
So
I think we actually have, you want the data.
This is a.
Out of the current residents in Radnor, what percentage have kids involved in the school
Right.
And
district?
people ask that question.
Correct.
Sure, I think we
all the
have,
time.
I'm gonna look at Mr. Petiti, but I think we have that somewhere. We actually have that statistic, and we have that statistic. Yeah, and I think we have that in other places, so I don't want to quote it now, but I think we have that.
Well, there used to be, a rule of thumb was about 30% of the students who live in Radnor don't use our public schools, but the enrollment creeping up would indicate perhaps that number has gone down. That,
I would say that it was the opposite, that we have about, if you looked at our percentage of population, again, well, let's look at the number, it's 30% are of our community, if you looked at our total
yeah,
community.
that's what I'm saying.
No,
30% are in private school.
I'll look at the numbers. I think,
Okay.
I think the number was more like 30% are in Radnor schools, 70%. I'm not talking about the private public. How many of our residents? There's two things we're talking about. There's two questions we're talking about here. So the one question is, what percentage of our overall Radnor population, which I know that's data we have kids currently in the school? That's probably around 30%, I'm guessing, but we'd have to check on that. The separate question is, how many of school-age children are attending Radnor versus private school? We also have that data as well, because we have to know that based on busing and other things. And I know during the sleep,
Yes.
we looked at that as well. So we could share that data another time. We have
Yeah,
that.
I think that would be good. Clearly, we're all, there doesn't seem to be much clarity up here on the board, and that's something, I don't know about anybody else, but I get that question a lot. I'd love to know just what.
Well, no, that's the delta of attendance,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that is the delta. That is a delta of attendance in any given year. Yep, okay, great. So,
I want to
Ken,
ask a
go ahead.
question. Mark, so let's say we don't apply for any, we have an interest in not going after any Plan Con dollars.
Correct.
What would be our obligations for any type of hypothetical future projects? What is our obligations to PDE if we have no interest in Plan Con dollars?
At current regulation, which is subject, is being reviewed to change, you still have to go ahead and submit the plan to them, have them approved to make sure that you're not being, again, fall under the Taj Mahal Act. That you have this feasibility study is still a requirement, prerequisite. even though you're not going for any Plan Con dollars.
So PDE still requires a feasibility study for a school district of Pennsylvania to do any type of renovation or additions, even if you have no interest in Plan Con dollars, you have to still submit before you can move forward.
Correct. As
Okay.
it stands today.
Yep, great. No, I appreciate that. Okay. So I think we've asked all of our questions. Do we have board discussion or comment about this? Oh, yes,
I
Bradley.
just have one more question that what you just asked prompted in my mind. How much do we have to redo the feasibility study, say if we need a construction project in 4 years? Can you do a more truncated, updated study based on
Yes.
what we're putting forward
Yes.
now? Thank you.
Because, again, typically what's going to happen is the only delta that's going to change is your population, your student enrollment. And if you have Decision Insight or another player involved, they'd be providing that information. So yes, you could go ahead and do that.
Okay, so I don't know if we have board discussion, if everybody feels good. All right, at this point, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of moving? Well, I mean, we asked Mark a lot of, no. We asked Mark a lot of really good questions, vetting the process, which is great. At this point, I would call the vote that we approve the Breslin Federo Architects and Decision Insight to move forward with these two studies for us. All those in favor? Okay, the motion approves 9-0. Great, thank you so much. All right, with that, we are going to move into our consent agenda. And although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. With the consent of all board members, they are therefore grouped, and approval is given in one motion. In the event a board member wants to discuss any item, the board president will move it to an appropriate place on the agenda. So, does anybody have any items that they would like to pull from the consent agenda? All righty, I've already pulled 14.1. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for items 10.1.
Susan, I think you were going to pull the Drexel contract.
It's not
here.
on
It was
this
last month.
agenda.
Yep, nope,
It was
we're all
last
set.
month.
So at this time, I would entertain a motion for items 10.1 through 13.3 and item 14.2. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 8-0 with Ms. Duffy away from the lectern, the dais. All righty, great. So now we can move right into our committee our committee reports. Let me just turn the page. Our liaison reports, I'm sorry. Delaware County Community College. Ms. Solomon.
No report. We no longer hold our January meeting, so my next report will be in April when we discuss the community college budget.
How was the dinner? Did you go? Were you able to go? Oh, sometimes we hear about a report about the dinner. I had to miss it. I was away.
I was back in October.
Oh, my God. The dinner wasn't in January?
No, it was back in October.
I'm sleep deprived from the baby, I got to tell you.
Ms. Stern?
I think I actually went. That's how sleep deprived I am with this new grandchild.
You need some rest.
I'm so sorry. Delaware County Intermediate Unit.
Yes, we had a meeting on February 5th. We usually have 2 meetings a month. This month, we only had one because there was a 3-hour retreat this past Saturday, where we got there's so many new board members that we had a really comprehensive, but at the same time, sort of just tip of the iceberg orientation on what the DCIU is all about. We got 2 big file folders worth of materials, and one that was in there, I got copies in case anybody, I don't have them yet, but you can have them. Program of Guide to Services for the DCIU. If you have some free time to read on your next vacation, there's a lot of stuff that happens at the DCIU, and this is going to be a handbook for those of us who are new to the board to dive into for a while. As I said,
And we'll be having the presentation in March.
right, and after 3.5 hours, that was just scratching the surface. I'm so glad she's coming next month because there is so much to know about the DCIU. It's not even
The
funny.
executive director for board members will be here at our next month's board meeting to just share information about the DCIU program.
Right. So, just quickly, as I said, the board members are populating the board, the new board members. There's going to be another election coming up for 5 districts, this for the next term from July 2020 to 2023. The DCIU is also doing superintendent searches. They've already placed somebody at William Penn, and they're currently working on Southeast Delco and Chester Upland, in addition to all the other things that they do. So it's a very busy place over there, and we'll learn more about it next month when the executive director comes here.
Great. Federal Relations Network, Andrew?
Okay. So this is probably the one liaison update where FRN is actually newsworthy. I just should say. So every year, the NSBA has a very special conference for school board members across the country called the Advocacy Institute. This is in addition to their annual conference. And usually it's held in January and February. This year is held February 2nd through the 4th in DC. And one of the most important topics that was covered among several topics was about recruitment and retention of teachers. And this is something that Jenny and I and George and I had a chance to discuss a little bit before the conference. I wanted to get some feedback from them about interests and needs along these lines. And so just to recap, what the Advocacy Institute basically is, it's a couple of days of training and discussion around important issues, legislative issues, topics for legislators to know about. And then we go to the Hill on one day and we meet with our representatives, so senators, congresspeople, House of Representatives, House reps. And what we do is we sit down with either them or staff and we just talk about relevant issues for our district or issues that we thought were relevant at the conference as a whole. So I decided of all the things that I could have talked about, I did decide to focus on that teacher recruitment and retention issue. And there will be more details for those of you who are information starved right now and just can't wait to learn more about this. In the GRCC meeting for next month, I will be giving a fuller report of this. But it's a great opportunity, and PSBA is actually involved in this as well. And we are exploring opportunities for maybe more board members to be involved in this event going forward. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Delaware County School Board's Legislative Council. Bradley?
The Legislative Council met on February 12th at 7:30 a.m. We discussed a number of topics. First of all, the governor had a proposed budget, which you may have heard some about in the last meeting. It folded into the discussion of the governor's budget. There is a proposal for charter school reform, the way charter schools are funded. I think it's important for everyone to know that there's a lot of supposed new money for school funding in the governor's budget, but a large proportion of that new money will only go forward if this charter school reform funding proposal goes forward as well. So there's not so much of a large amount of new basic education funding. A lot of that's dependent on this charter school reform. So that'll be something to follow, and we had a robust discussion about that at the Legislative Council. We also, near and dear to our hearts in Radnor, had a discussion about the Legislative Council potentially hosting a discussion and forum about changing school start times based on adolescent sleep needs. And in fact, we even got into a bit of a meta debate about the fact that there's no pending legislation at the statewide level about that. Nonetheless, there was a Senate resolution which led to a joint commission report, which gave a lot of advice to schools in Pennsylvania about changing these start times. So it looks like the Legislative Council will be going forward with that forum potentially, and hopefully give schools in Delaware County information that they can use if they're going to consider what Radnor did last year. Next meeting will be March 11th, 7:30 a.m.
Thank you. Pennsylvania School Boards Association. Andrew?
So, my fellow board members, you will have gotten a little nudge by email. Just informational, but once again, as I mentioned in our last meeting, the big event for PSBA along the lines of the NSBA Advocacy Institute that I just mentioned, similar concept. So PSBA members go to Harrisburg and meet with each other for a little bit, and they learn about some issues. Then they go over to the Capitol and meet with legislators and discuss issues that are timely and important. So this is just another reminder that it is Monday, March 23rd, and it goes most of the days from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m.
Great, thank you so much. And now Parks and Rec, I think you're going to cover that one as well, right? Sarah was away?
So at the Parks and Rec meeting on Thursday, February 13th, there were resident concerns discussed about Hartford Park and dogs and safety. And there were some issues or maybe some proposed solutions that were discussed there. And then most of the rest of the meeting, there was a presentation discussion of prospective park projects by the Radnor Wayne Little League. And that's of special importance to us because the school board, we own in part or whole a number of relevant park properties. So that was Parks and Rec. And our next meeting is, as always, the second Thursday of every month.
Great, thank you so much. Now we'll have an update from Radnor Educational Foundation. Liz?
We did not meet this month, but I did attend the gala on February 8th, along with a lot of board members and our superintendent, Mr. Batchelor, and it was a great success. They actually, I know their target, I don't have their specific numbers. We're meeting next month on March 26th, and hopefully I'll come back with reporting what they've raised. But their target was 250 people, and they had well over that. So I think they deemed it a great success. And one of the things, I'll just on a personal note, thought was really terrific was that the range of people that attended, I saw a lot of Radnor empty nesters. So, you know, people who had children who had graduated who came back to, you know, just support this great foundation. So it's nice to see community involvement for the organization, you know, after, you know, they're a direct benefit of their students receiving the benefits. So it's happy to say there was great success.
That's great. That's great to hear. Okay, Radnor Alumni Council.
No report on any new activities, although in light of the slide that appeared during the farewell to Mr. Brooks, we may be asking the Alumni Council to embargo and secure any copies of the RHS 1996 yearbook.
Too late, I've already secured yours. Go all you want.
Oh, that is good. Radnor High School Scholarship Fund. Jeff?
Well, I have to start by just saying that one's head might have had a little bit more of hair in 1996. Sorry.
My hair was about the length of Mrs. Monahan's in my yearbook picture.
Okay, sorry.
You got to see it. I'll get it out to you, Jeff.
The Radnor High School Scholarship Fund met last evening, February 24th, and I want to remind the public and everyone that scholarships are available and that everyone that has an eligible student and an eligible family is encouraged to apply. The deadline is March 25th at 5 p.m., and more information can be found at Radnor Scholarship Fund. I was about to say foundation. Sorry, I'm getting confused with all these. RadnorScholarshipFund.com. Our next meeting will be on March 16th, and we are looking to brainstorm some new ideas for visibility and community engagement and events, and I'll look forward to reporting back next month.
That's great. Thank you so much. Radnor Page. Sarah?
I did reach out to the leadership of Radnor Page, and we currently have no report or meetings on the agenda or on the horizon.
Oh, great, thank you. Radnor Committee for Special Education. Nancy?
Yeah, I have a few updates. On January 31st, the committee met with administration, and I touched base with them earlier this week, and they shared with me that they are very happy with the good relationship that they currently have with administration, and based on the experiences they've been sharing and the concerns, that there's been a lot of transparency, which they greatly appreciate. On February 10th, their winter newsletter went out, and I believe I shared that with the board and some administrators, and hopefully it's gotten out beyond that. A key piece of the newsletter that they're very proud and wanted me to share is the Radnor Champions fall soccer season. They had over 25 players, and more than just the sports aspect of it,
They recruited some volunteers, about 25 Radnor High School students. Not only did they help in teaching the kids as well as being positive role models, but it was really kind of an interactive building of the relationship on both sides. It really provided both sides with learning the value of patience as well as compassion. And they look forward to having a clinic for champions this spring. Other events on February 12th, they had a social gathering for the committee. And one of the areas of focus going forward is post-secondary preparedness. So they have an upcoming gathering on March 18th for parents of children transitioning out of high school. And more information will be available for that. That's it.
That's great, thank you. That's a nice update. Okay, so do we have any new business tonight? No? Okay, seeing none, I'd just like to make board announcements. Our next round of committee meetings will begin on Tuesday, March 10th. The Policy, Finance, and Government Relations and Communications Committees will be meeting beginning on 5 p.m. on Tuesday, March 5th in the Administration Building, the ground floor conference room. Following that, our Curriculum and Facilities Committees will meet on Tuesday, March 17th, beginning at 5 p.m., once again in the Administration Building, the ground floor conference room. And our next regular business meeting will be here in the Radnor Township Building, the Radnor Shire Room, Tuesday, March 24th, beginning at 7 p.m. Okay, with that, do we have any additional public comment? Citizens are encouraged to address the board at this time to comment on matters of concern, official action, or deliberation, which are or may be before the board. Speakers are respectfully requested to avoid redundancy and to limit their comments to issues for which there was not previous opportunity to offer remarks. Once again, we ask if you come forward, please state your name, your street address, and your topic, and that you limit your individual comments to not more than 4 minutes per Board Policy 006, and if you haven't already done so, to please print your name at the sign-in sheet in the back of the room. Should you be unable to attend tonight's meeting, you may submit your comments by email to boardcomments@rtsd.org or in writing to Mr. Michael Petiti, Radnor Township School District, 135 South Wayne Avenue, Wayne, Pennsylvania, 19087. If there are any questions, administration will review them, and the corresponding answers will be placed on the district's board docs website by the start of the first committee meeting of the following month. Do we have any additional public comment? Welcome, Dr. Winters.
I have 4 points this evening, and first, as you look at the feasibility studies, which we heard a lot about tonight, I would hope that consideration would be given to other options other than simply doing additional construction to meet the future enrollment needs of the district. Secondly, in regard to enrollment, one of the things that I noticed when I was looking back through 100 years of the League of Women Voters history in Radnor Township is for many decades, the League of Women Voters actually went door to door to find out what the actual enrollment was for students in this district. So believe it or not, the League actually got the enrollment facts for the district. I'm not ready to do
At an offer?
If the price is right. Times have changed. Secondly, I would like to encourage, as you look at these feasibility studies, that board members and members of the public promote a new comprehensive land use plan in Radnor Township. It is long overdue and is something we desperately need to guide future decision makings about our township. And third, I would like board members and members of the community to consider seeking the fee of $16,000 plus to be paid to Villanova University for high school graduation rehearsal and actual graduation ceremonies, to be paid, not to be paid, but is to be considered by Villanova as a donation in lieu of the taxes unpaid by the institution. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you so much.